All right. I am here today with Dr. Jeremy Weiss. This guy is a podcasting OG and legend. You guys have to check out while we're talking, just go right to rise25.com to go check out and see what he's been building. We between the two of us, we have over 30 years of experience in podcasting. That's crazy because I don't know if podcast was it around 30 years ago? I don't know. But we've been through so many tech changes, so many revelations, and he has focused his career on helping businesses with podcasting and ultimately turning conversations into credibility, into clients, into community. That's something that we both really. I work behind the scenes of companies who've done it, like Johnny Dumas of Entrepreneur Fire and Lewis Howes of School of Greatness. And so there's so much richness that we're going to gain out of this. And my career was not focused on that. I had the benefit of being part of some of those launches and learning later in my career about it. But Jeremy's been involved in this process for a very long time. So Jeremy, welcome to Vision Pros Live. Thanks for coming back and being willing to go live with me. I know the value bombs are just going to come from every direction in this. So man, I'm overexcited, man. Thanks for being here.
I'm excited. When you say OG, I just think of my daughters calling me a middle-aged, old, gray-haired man. So, thanks for the nice intro.
My daughters do the same thing to me already too. So
if anyone's an ego, just I just go to my daughters; they'll knock it down real quick. So
see, I'm of that old category where I can say already, even though I was like, no, I'm there. I need to get over it. So I try to hide it with the long hair. But all right, man, all you podcasters out there and all you vision pros too, don't sleep on this one. Podcasting is changing the world. We had a president, almost president of the United States, right, use podcasting to get his brand out there. That was a monumental shift. We had Joe Rogan last year. What was the deal worth that he made with Spotify? 250.
I think it was more, maybe more than that.
I don't even remember. It was huge, but these are the types of changes that are occurring in this industry. And now that video is so much easier and internet and audio and doing AI clips and stuff, there's never been an easier time to get in the podcasting world, but there's never been a more competitive time either. And so knowing how to do this the right way is super important. Jeremy, let's just talk to the truth of that a little bit to get started.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think of it, Jackson, in my mind is, and I've always thought like this: how do I build amazing relationships? And when I think of how I build amazing relationships, I think of how do I give to someone? Okay, and so podcasting is one way. That's the medium. I've one of the mediums I've chosen to do that because I feel like if you profile someone, this is just like we're doing here. You're profiling someone else's expertise, and you turn that into a post. You turn that into snippets, and essentially you're turning out these marketing materials, for this company and this person, right? And so it's funny. So we have a referral pipeline meeting that we do as a company, and we have a client pipeline meeting that we do as a company. You use a lot of things. We use Active Campaign. You said you wanted to get granular with some stuff, so I'll get granular. So, I've used Pipedrive. We've used Pipedrive before. We've used Trello before. We just hit an Active Campaign because it does, you could do deals. We also send a lot of emails out to the email list. So, but when we have this meeting, the pipeline meeting, the columns, as you move someone through a pipeline, there's columns, and we kind of call it our columns for giving to someone. So it's not like, I don't know what most columns are, but like, hey, we sent them an email, we reached out. Like our columns are columns of giving. So one is, have we had them on the podcast, right? That's a form of giving to us. Yeah. Another is, have we introduced them to someone else to be on a podcast that we know? Another form of giving. Another is, did we send them a gift, right? Yes. Another is, we do a physical newsletter. I think I have one handy here, where we have an insert of some of our past guests in there. And did we feature them in the insert, right? Awesome. Did we post about them on social? I mean, the list goes on and on. So when we're talking about, let's say, oh, Jackson's awesome, we want to make sure we just keep in touch with them. It's not necessarily, hey, Jackson, like, what's up? It's what are the things that we could do to add value to that person? It could be introduction for a potential client for that person or a potential partner for that person. So I make personally about 5 to 30 introductions every single day And so that's what we think about. So back to your question, which is like the podcast I think of is a relationship builder, a way for me to give to my network of people. And I've found no better way to do that over the past over decade, right? And if you asked me to write a blog post, okay, my background is in biochemistry, okay, at Madison. I do not like writing. It's just not something I love, but I can talk to someone just like we are now for 20, 30, 40, 50 minutes and no problem. So some people love to write. So great, write a blog post, right? Like I'm talking about podcasting. If you don't like talking to people, then don't do a podcast, right? Write blog posts. But I've been able to publish 2 written posts a week for over a decade. Now, that's because I talked to someone, right? And then I don't do the writing for it, but like our team will write it up and post it. But I've been able to pump out that content every single week because of that. And so I could just talk into, we're using StreamYard here. You could use Zoom. I use Zoom. You can use Microsoft Teams, whatever you like to use, because people are always asking about the technology, right? I mean, that's the first question people ask. And I'm like, okay, that's not the question I think is the most important, which is what relationships do you want to build? But, some people get hung up on these things. So I'll just answer that question if people want. I mean, you could literally get a USB mic on Amazon for $100, right? This is a Yeti. It looks like Jackson has a fancier one than me. I think it's like a Shure mic over there. I have an ATR.
All $45 of fancy.
Is that a Shure mic? What is that?
No, dude, this is a CAD U37, and everybody I know that has a Yeti is like, "What mic is that?" It sounds like a mic is $45 on Amazon.
Right. If this one conks out in the middle of this interview, I have an ATR 2100 over there that I could literally USB and all these USB in your computer, right? You don't need a fancy soundboard and all these things, and so you need a recording like Zoom, StreamYard, Microsoft Teams, and a mic. Okay, that's the equipment setup. Because actually, they were setting up a studio in LA. They're like, Jeremy knows about podcasting. They introduced me to this person. We get on the call. He's like, I'm creating this studio in LA. What equipment should I get? I'm like, I'm the wrong person to be talking to. Okay, like
I'll give a shout out to the right person.
Yeah, strategy. Go ahead. Who's the right person?
I want to make sure too. Like, Jeremy's got the secrets, my friends. There's things that you want to hear, and there's things that you need to hear. This is going to be about the things you need to hear. So Junaid Ahmed of Home Studio Mastery is the best person. If you got the dime to get a Lamborghini style, studio, go to Junaid. He's freaking awesome.
All right. Well, I have someone to refer to.
If you do not have the money for it, go to freaking ChatGPT and just say, "Can you just give me the basics of what I need for my studio?" No. Like, I don't need a fancy studio to provide value. Why? Because I know what Jeremy knows, and I want to stand the test of time with this podcasting thing. Jeremy, you nailed it. I couldn't have simplified it better myself. What relationships are we building? Right? We need to be building relationships, and we need to know what we're building. We need to know why we're building it, and we need to know how to provide value to people. So my rule at First Class Business for the team, we have one rule to remember. It is, we do what is best for those that we serve.
Yep.
We do what's best for those. Everything we do should be aligned with, am I doing the best thing I can possible for the audience I'm talking to, for Jeremy, for my team members that I meet? If I just stick with that principle and live by that, I'm going to carve out success for myself. So Jeremy, again, thank you for hitting that and talking about some of the intricate details of what we can build. But I do want to make sure we get into the intricate details of what you talked about, that pipeline you built out, and how you're focused on, like, let's give a gift. Let's make sure we're providing new value. What else can we do to help these people? That's so brilliant, yet so overlooked.
Yeah, and back to what you said about what relationships are we building, right? And that goes back to, because I find the mistakes I've seen people make is they focus on sometimes the wrong things, like how do I get downloads? How do I get subscribers? What technology do I use? They get hung up on these things, but what relationships they're building, really, we usually start people with a strategy of, creating your dream 200, right? So what are the relationships that you should be building or can be building? And I think of it as, well, what's the biggest initiative? for the company, because I feel the podcast serves whatever initiative you have, right? Sometimes it's, build out a pipeline of referral partners. Sometimes it's clients. Sometimes it's another initiative. I was talking to one company we worked with. It shifted. The initiative shifted, right? It was like, okay, we want to build out partners, right? So we brainstormed the people in their industry that they should be giving to, right, through the podcast and partnerships. But then what happened was they were at capacity. Okay, their company had all the clients they wanted. It was an engineering firm, and they're like, "What do we do? What do we do now?" I'm like, "Well, obviously, you want to build the well before you need it." So I'm like, "Don't stop doing what you're doing." But also, I'm like, "Well, what's your biggest initiative?" Their biggest initiative is hiring, right? Because their team's at capacity. Great. So where do you hire from? Oh, we get lots of referrals from people in engineering at universities. Okay, so have you had any of these professors who refer you a lot of these candidates on your podcast yet? Oh no. Okay, well then use it to build relationships with people that stay top of mind, the people who are referring you good hires, right? And so it goes with whatever the initiative is, and that's how you figure out like what relationships do I build.
Huge. That is so awesome. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to come right back and we're going to dive in deeper into what Jeremy's up to with podcasting and how we can help you guys build podcasts for the sake of amplifying your visions, for the sake of creating traction with relationships and understanding ultimately how to create something long term. This is a huge component of how to create long term sustainability in 2026. And it's amazing how many people aren't looking into it yet. We'll see you on the other side.
All right, welcome in to Vision Pros Live with Jackson Callum. I'm your show host. We will be doing interviews for visionary entrepreneurs and guest leaders who are building fantastic visions out there.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Vision Pros Live. I'm your show host, Jackson Callum, founder and CEO of First Class Business. And we have the grand fortune today of being live with a podcast legend and Dr. Jeremy Weisz. I've really enjoyed the process of getting to know him, looking into his company as well, rise25.com, and seeing that his more than a decade of experience helping companies use a platform such as podcasting to turn conversations into credibility, clients, and community is so applicable. I know a lot of people get into podcasting because they just want to build a hobby, and there's nothing wrong with that. But there's also nothing more sad to me than somebody who's pursuing something like that and then they have to give it up because they can't afford financially to keep moving. You can have your cake and eat it too, my friends. You can do both things. So in this conversation, Jeremy and I are going to expound on our combined 30 plus years of experience being behind the scenes at companies and also through podcasting, working with founders and CEOs and thought leaders to turn these conversations, their conversations, into trust, authority, and long-term business relationships. And I think that's so key to look at. You guys can go find on ChatGPT, or you can find a bunch of young gurus who maybe have a year's worth of experience. There's all sorts of stuff out there. But what I find really helpful is when I dive in and talk to the 10-year veterans and stuff. I'm always looking for those people like, dang, what else can I extract and understand? So we're going to talk about why most podcasts stall after early excitement. In fact, I'm going to knock that out right now. Why? Because it's hard. It's hard. That's it. It's just hard. You're going to learn along the way that it's hard. So if you don't have the passion for it, then you might just skip the project altogether. Two, we're going to talk about how elite hosts use conversations as a strategic asset. Listen, when you tell somebody you love them, you're using a strategic asset. It doesn't mean you're manipulating, it doesn't mean you're bad. It means you're smart to communicate in a way that somebody loves, but always do so intentionally. So we're going to talk about, again, how the elite hosts, they have certain patterns about them, things they do. We're also going to talk about what credibility looks like in a noisy, AI saturated world, meaning we don't want to focus on the saturation of what you can find anywhere else. We want to focus on what truly drives credibility. And we're going to talk about from both sides. If you have major credibility, and if you don't think you have credibility, what do you do in those cases? And lastly, we're going to talk about how podcasting fits into a healthy, sustainable business ecosystem. When I was with Junaid Ahmed building out a studio in Atlanta, we were building it for a mergers and acquisitions firm that really knew very little about podcasting. And they had this firm, they didn't even understand the gold mine of what they were building. They were doing it for fun. But as we talked about how the podcast gives them an opportunity to explore their frequently asked questions and the buyer's questions that they get, and talk about case studies and invite clients in to interview them and showcase the depth. They become industry leaders while also ultimately creating a media hub where the entire industry can come and see and learn from them and see, wow, that's why these guys lead this industry. There's so many opportunities of what can be done with a podcast and what can be done to expand your vision through podcasting. So I'm going to bring Jeremy on. I'm going to pick his brain more than mine about this. And real quick, before I bring him back on, a couple of other resources for you visionaries out there. These are 3 phenomenal visionary companies that are out there helping the world. One is Dr. Shannon and Dr. Justin Pierce with Journey to Wellness. Check out what they're doing in the naturopath space. These 2 people are people I've known for more than 8 years. I've seen their growth from Mill Pond all the way to Journey to Wellness, and now we're going to be rebranding to drshannon.com. And we're over 250,000 followers, but what really drives me is I sent 3 people to Shannon who did not have a doctor who could help them with their circumstances in life. And I had heard Shannon works in miracles. I don't know a lot about medicine. So I sent these 3 people over different time periods. Every single one of them came back. After I followed up, I was like, hey, how'd it go? And they're like, oh my gosh, Shannon is the absolute best. Nobody's been able to help me like she has. So again, I can't speak from a technical standpoint, but I can tell you, I very much believe in what she's able to do. I'm grateful she's helped my friends and family members. Then there's Jennifer Reed with Practice Makes Permanent. Jennifer Reed is an emotional intelligence guru who also specializes in SQ, spiritual intelligence, and Practice Makes Permanent is a new entity that she came out with after her 20 plus years of working at one of the, I don't know, I'll let you guys decide, working at the IRS. I don't think building cultures in that company or that brand or that government entity would be that easy to do. I just have a feeling about it. And she's been an executive in that brand and in others, and she has such a strong, profound depth of being able to facilitate leadership conversations around culture. And I can tell you, if you focus on your culture and helping build up your people internally, the direct byproduct of that is actually profitability and revenue growth too. And of course, everybody feels better about what they're doing as well. So tap into her wisdom as well. And then lastly is the Water Project. The Water Project is something that's near and dear to my heart by choice. I have personally never been thirsty in my entire life. I didn't know what that was like, but when I heard about this project and what it did, and I saw that when you contribute to a specific project in some random part of Africa, they actually do the social media evidence. They show you that they built a borehole well, or that they created a sand dam and how they did it and what they trained the community on so they could sustain. And I was like, man, that level of transparency is so inspiring. And it made me start to think about how, what if my kids didn't have water and they had to leave school to get it, or I had to leave work in order to find water? Like, what would my life be like? That would hold me back in tremendous fashion. So when I saw the kids on this site celebrating water, like my kids celebrate Christmas Day, you're gonna see it right here. I was like, oh my gosh, I got to do something about this. So it's one of the things that we talk about on the show. If you have the ability to contribute to the Water Project, join us in that. We contribute monthly to it. I hope you have the opportunity the same. If you don't have the finances to contribute, my final hope on this, just share it with your friends and family over dinner. Talk about it. See what happens. You might inspire somebody to give $500 in one of these communities, and that could have a generational impact for decades on the well-being of those individuals. So my friends, we have 8 billion people to serve on this planet. If you know of another cause, drop in a link, drop it in the comments. Let me see that cause. I'll personally take a look at it, and it might be something that I also promote here on Vision Pros Live. So now, without further ado, we need to get back to serving each and one of you. Jeremy, again, thanks for being here. Podcasting for leaders. Let's dive in.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man, absolutely. So these leaders, again, do we want to dive in to talk about how businesses can leverage podcasting first, or do we want to talk about the nature of lead hosts and what the things that they do to maintain their relationships so well?
Yeah, we can talk about lead hosts, which gets into the content piece, because it's a common question people ask is when we're talking about podcasting, the strategy, they immediately want to go into the actual interview and actual content. So we can go there for a second. When I think of it, just to step back for a second, I think of kind of 5 steps to profit with the podcast. And when I talk about that, it's, let me just qualify it for a second, Jackson, because I'm talking about B2B podcast. Okay. I'm not talking about a comedy podcast. I'm not talking about a true crime podcast, a sports podcast. I am nowhere near an expert in any of those, but what I am, really versed in over the years is someone who's got a business and they use a podcast to, like you mentioned, increase authority, trust, build relationships. And so create, our step are create that dream 200, like build out that strategy. Then it's reaching out to those people. Then it's producing, the art and science of producing amazing content. And so it's kind of the third step, I guess you could say, in there. And with that, some of the things I think about is I want the guest to, I'm not into gotcha questions, right? Or anything like that.
Sure.
But I want the guest to feel special. I also want to speak to the expertise of that guest. And so I kind of, I remember when I had one of the co-founders of Pixar on the podcast, and I was like inside, I'm like, and I've done thousands of interviews, and I'm thinking, I was like freaking out inside, Jackson. I'm like, what am I going to talk about? What are we going to say? Blah, blah, blah. I'm not sure. And I'm like, just settle down, Jeremy. And what I go to is more like open-ended questions that let them expand. Like, and a good one that I always like is, how do you start the business? How to get started? And there's always a story, right? And so I remember I asked that question. I think he talked for like 20 minutes. Like I would just sat back, like could have had popcorn, just listened. I don't need to say a word. Just how did Pixar get started, right? And he went and told some, stories about George Lucas and Steve Jobs eventually investing, putting money into Pixar, and just told some incredible stories. I could sit back and relax. So, sometimes it's just, I think of what's the question to ask that elicits a good story. Okay. And it's a little bit of prep before, right? I always like to ask what that person's thinking about, and maybe they have a story, like a fun story that they have from their journey. But as specific stories, if we think of what we remember and what we learn from, it's a story, right? And so if we think of our best, favorite TV shows, movies, are stories, right? And so getting the guest to tell stories, and I find get the guests to tell stories, because as some guests are more dynamic than others. So I always think of what's a question that will elicit a good story. And it's usually an open-ended thing, like how'd you get started? Also, it could be, what was a big challenge you experienced? What was a high or success you had? Just what are some questions that they can expand on, right? So that's how I think about content. The second thing is I always think of, it's not just the content, but it's the relationships. Like what we talked about before, I'm always thinking of how do I give to my relationships? And so how do I mush together content and relationships? Okay. And so I just had recently a guest on, CJ Bruce, who's got a digital marketing company for food and beverage brands. And so from a content perspective, all right, I tell also people be selfish, meaning ask questions you're curious about. So I was curious about, I'm big into, Jackson, I think you are too, like healthy foods, like what kind of kombucha flavors or brands does someone drink? What kind of protein bars do they have? What kind of plant-based products? And so I took the liberty, and he works with a lot of these different companies, to ask him what he likes, right? And so he was rattling off, different names of companies, and I was like writing them down. I'm like, and he felt he was boring me. I'm like, keep going. Like, what else do you eat? And what do you like? And I'm like, I'm writing my grocery list down right now, what things I should try based on your recommendations. But in addition to that, we're also giving a shout to some of these brands, right, as well, from a relationship perspective. So for me, it's great content, right? Because I care about it. And not everyone does care about it, but that's fine. Like, I was really curious, and so I asked, and we went deep. And he was like, yeah, I could stop when you want. And sometimes I'll ask about books, because as a host, what do you geek out on, right? And maybe other people don't, but that's okay, right? And so I may ask about, Jackson, give me all of your favorite books. And I just had someone on earlier today also, and they named like 3, and I'm like, keep going. Like, because I could tell they had more, and they're like, are you sure? I'm like, yeah, go on your bookshelf and just read them off right now. And so they're like, oh, How to Win Friends and Influence People. That's great. He's like, Think and Grow Rich. He said, E-Myth by Michael Gerber. He said Getting Things Done by David Allen. And so when I find sometimes, Jackson, I have my Audible app open and I'll literally buy it by the time they're done talking about it. I'm still listening, but I'm like, oh yeah, that's a good one. I'll type it in, I'll buy it. So questions that you're curious about, that you care about, that, and so that's from a content perspective.
Well, you're an action-oriented listener. And sometimes when we were younger and in school, some teachers hate that and they punish you for it. But I found that it's one of the coolest and most important ways to honor somebody. And so I want to recap some of the things that I learned from you just now, because I don't want anybody to miss it. Please give in the comments too what you learned on this, because there's so many subtle realities of what we can pick up. So you talked about asking people about a story. And one of the things I love about how you interview, Jeremy, I don't do this, by the way. I think I come a little bit across more as hosty, but when I talk to you, it's like we're in a living room talking. It's a very personable experience. I do tend to focus a little bit more on tone and cadence. And so I'm going to talk about that side of asking about story.
And that's your style. You know what I mean? There's no right or wrong. The beauty of the podcast is you do whatever you want and it fits your style, right? So that's your style.
And that's exactly right. And we don't have to be apologetic about our styles. We can embrace our styles on this, and we can still collaborate and find ways to engage them. So when you're asking about story, one of the easiest things to ask about stories, I learned this from one of our past guests 2 years ago. I just can't remember his name, but he's a phenomenal networker. And he said he always leads with asking people and just saying, "Tell me about your story." And so there's a big difference, and there's a huge difference in tone for those of you who are newer at the interview process of, "Jeremy, what's your story?" That's like intimidating. It's like, what the heck do you mean by what's my story? But if I say, "Tell me about your story," and I use a nicer voice and I leave it open-ended and I'm a bit playful with it, that encourages somebody to be like, okay, cool, I can create a story on it. And they might ask, like, well, what do you mean by that? Like, no, like seriously, like beginning to end, or you can start in the middle. Tell me about yourself, right? You can always expand on it. So there's so many ways to do that. And the second thing that I caught on that, you said, get your guest to tell a story. That's something I can work on as a host, is finding out how do I get somebody to mention that Pixar story and make that plug so that it's easier for them to dive into it. You're a pro, so you're able to do it by yourself. But sometimes as hosts, we have to learn to nurture the guest into the type of environment or the type of mindset to speak the right direction. You talked about the grocery list. What Jeremy's alluding to, what he's exemplifying, is we can take action on what our guest is giving us in the moment. And what we're doing is we're honoring and we're validating how they feel about what they're sharing, which gives them more confidence to continue to open up and explore and not think about the show. Another thing that you did on that, you talked about the shouting out to the brands. Just like I called out John Lee Dumas and Lewis Howes in the beginning of this. I did that on purpose. And what we're going to do with our content afterwards, we have a resource section built into our landing page where we literally tag John Lee Dumas and his brand, and we tag Lewis Howes and his brand. And as our company grows and as our team for distribution grows, we're going to be reaching out to these celebrity level influencers and say, hey, by the way, you've been mentioned 30 times throughout Vision Pros Live by 30 different people. We would love to interview you on this. And we can use those examples to showcase and put materials together that do what Jeremy talked about. How do we serve those individuals and help them realize we want to build relationships with them too? And then you talked about the books. I love asking people, what are your 3 favorite resources for visionaries? What 3 resources do you recommend? And I like the word resources because I want to hear about the books, but some people get really creative and they're like,
also some people don't read books. They may listen to a podcast. They may have like an app or software they like, so it lets them go with whatever direction they want.
I want to plug one more gap because I love your concept of we got to talk to our Dream 200, make that list. That is for those who are elite at business, by the way. And I want to be careful on this. You can call whoever you want. Don't get me wrong. Don't let me control you on this. But here's my wise advice on this from having ruined my Dream 200 in my first few years of business when I had no idea what I was doing. I thought I was the hot stuff. I thought I could influence people. And what I do, I called my dream list and I pretty much pissed everybody off because I had no idea how to provide real value. I wasn't there yet. So here's my gift to you who are newer. Write your 200 dream list and then just put it in a drawer for a little while. And do what Michael Gerber of the E-Myth talked about. Thank you for mentioning that book, Jeremy. It's one of my absolute favorites. I regret not reading it the day it came across my desk. I read it 8 years later, and I was like, oh, I should have read this. He talks about calling 300 people in your market to find out how do they feel about what's going on. So my request for all of you, for your own sakes, at least call and talk to 300 people. First, you can find them on LinkedIn, you can find them on Facebook, validate what you're up to, learn how to swing the bat and strike out over and over and over before you call your 200. Then once you're prepared, once you're well versed, you know what you're doing, now it's time to really dive into that 200 and say, I'm going to own this. And so you don't have to wait fully, but my recommendation is at least swing the bat a few times. Do those people a favor and prepare yourself super well so that you're on point when you talk to them. So let's see. You can either double down with me on that, Jeremy, or we can go right into.
Yeah, I wanted to just piggyback on that for a second because, you know, I was looking up because I couldn't remember the name of the book, but to talk about how do you reach out and approach Dream 200. And for me, when I think of the podcast, I always tell people, you don't start off with the coldest of cold. Start off with the people you know and build from there. So you don't have to go to someone you don't know. But it was a really good book about
that.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm gonna, and again, I want you. You're gonna challenge me on this. But if I've been a bonehead kid or a bonehead for 25 years of my life, and I go and tell my friends or family that, hey, I'm starting a podcast, I'm going to get all sorts of people who love me enough to push back and say, what the freak do you think you know about podcasting? And that can crush your ego. It can crush your aspirations. I love that Taylor Welch says, don't share your dreams with your friends and family. And I get what he's saying. Don't share your goals with them because they're going to try to tear it down and stop you from doing something stupid. But there's a balance. So Jeremy, you're right. You got to know if your family is toxic or not as well in the process. But yes, there's a context on it. So,
I mean, you know, like I tell people, start with your relationships. And when I say that, I'm talking more like the business sense. Like if you have key clients or partners already, like you reach out to them and they know people in that sphere. But there was a really good book that I listened to about this topic called The Third Door. And so I encourage people to check it out. Alex, I don't know how to pronounce his last name, Benayan. And it's really good about how he built relationships and connected with like Bill Gates and just some really high level people. And he talks about how he messed up along the way and what he did well. And on that topic, you know, Never Eat Alone by Keith Ferrazzi is another great book about relationship building. So there's a lot out there as far as that goes. But you mentioned something before about stories of guests, and here's when you said it, it just popped in my mind what I actually do, because sometimes I don't realize what I'm doing in the moment. But sometimes people will talk and they won't be telling a story. They may share, like I had someone talk about a website. They're like, oh yeah, we connect like ChatGPT to this other AI tool, and I'm like, oh, can you give me an example? And so by saying, can you give me an example, almost forces someone to tell a story, right? And so if they're saying, well, Jackson, like my leadership principles are blah, blah, whatever. And you're like, oh, cool. Can you give me an example of when, you know, so it almost force functions someone into telling a story. And it helps me understand what they're talking about, because someone said an acronym and I was like, I had no idea what they were saying with that. Okay. And I was like, can you give me an example of how you use that and just tell me what it is? Right. And because some people, they're so smart and it's industry jargon and most people may not even know what they're talking about. So, hey, can you share an example of that? Is a really good way I have found to get someone to tell a story. I
love that. And I love that it still gives you the position of not necessarily having to admit that you don't know, but I'm going to juxtaposition that as well and transition us to what credibility really looks like in this noisy, saturated world, because it's also okay, my friends. And in fact, it's encouraged to not know. And so
100%. I figured if I don't know, I'm sure there's a lot of other people that don't know. Same thing with you, right? And so people are probably wondering what was that acronym? I know you lose someone. So
exactly. And so I think a lot of hosts mess up in the early days, and salespeople do this all the time too, where they feel like they have to know it all, and they pretend they have to know it all. But in reality, one of the greatest things that can liberate you is a quote from Matt Cutts, the search director of Google, when he was teaching our young startup back in 2010. He said, "Hey guys, I'm not the god of SEO. So I don't know everything there is to know about it. The true sign of an expert is not somebody who knows it all. It's somebody who's willing to go get the answer." And so he said, there's 2,000 people here who change the algorithm every single day. How am I going to know what they did today? And so I will go get the answer for you. But that's the same as everybody. So if you're a new host and you hear something you don't know, lean into your credibility by saying, you know what? I don't know if my audience already knows about this or not, but that's a new term for me. What is that? And what is that acronym? Well, where is that applicable for my life? And your audience is going to go, oh my gosh, I can trust this person. This person's actually willing to be real with me, and they're human too. So Jeremy, let's talk about credibility from all sorts of angles on your side as well.
And sometimes coming from beginner mindset, I mean, some people, and sometimes I get worried, people can think I'm dumb if I, don't, know this or whatever it is. But for instance, I had Dimitri Buterin on, okay, who is co-founder of Block Geeks, and his son founded Ethereum, okay? Woo! And so when I had Dimitri on, I'm like, Dimitri, I'm super confused with Ethereum, cryptocurrency, NFTs. Yeah, and so
I am too.
And he's like, break it down. He's like, Jeremy, I'll break it down for you. And again, sometimes I don't have an ego. I really don't know. And so he did an amazing job explaining how it works. Like, he's overqualified to teach this to me, but if we're going to talk about it, I kind of wanted to understand the basics. Right. And so it was a really interesting episode. And I could have been like, well, he's going to be like, Jeremy's such a dummy. Like, but it really helped. And some people have different definitions of these things too. Right. And so I just wanted to hear from him. And so he really broke it down in a simple way and allowed me to understand. And then, like, when I forget, Jackson, because I'm like, wait, what was that? I'll just go back and listen to the episode and have him explain it again virtually,
Yeah, you got a forever mentor on that, and free mentorship from somebody who otherwise would have been pretty hard to reach. So there's so many hidden secrets too of the value behind what podcasting can do for us. So from a B2B standpoint and credibility, I'll make one other claim about it that can help people that I think too many people accidentally have blind spots on and fall victim of. If you're a doctor, never use the words, well, you can trust me, I'm a doctor. When we position our authority based on our title, we're only showing that we can't explain or we don't really understand the value of something. And I see founders do this. So many different industries, they fall victim of saying, well, we're the best, or you should trust us because we have 6,000 reviews or whatever. That's a false sense of authority. So what elements do you help clients realize they can put into place to create a true sense of credibility for what they do, Jeremy?
So on the topic of authority, it's funny you mentioned the doctor thing. So I'm listening to the revised version of, anyone out there is listening to Influence by Robert Cialdini. There's a new version, new and expanded version. And I'm listening to it now. I have like 3 hours left of it, but he talks about how that is an authority, right? There's multiple layers of authority and credibility. And he said the people in these commercials would hire someone from a sitcom or soap opera that played a doctor, wasn't even a doctor, on there. Yeah. And that was enough to get credibility that they played a doctor on TV, right? And I forgot what the saying is like
Joey from
I'm
Friends.
Not a doctor, but I played one on TV, right? And but it still works, even if someone, right? And so sometimes, again, there's layers of credibility.
In the mass market, though, I mean, let's be real.
Yeah.
Like, so in the mass market, it works with general pop. Yeah. But if you're working with elite minds,
I'm just saying there's layers of credibility, and there's no better credibility. And I've talked to some of the top direct response marketers and copywriters in the world. Okay, and they're the best in the world at this, and they say, I don't create copy, I assemble copy, and a lot of it is testimonials and case studies, like real testimonials and case studies. So if we talk about real authority, it's like someone who used a service, got an actual result, and talked about it, right? So there's, I don't know, maybe you could tell me, what's a better social proof, credibility, authority than lots of testimonial case studies? And there's ways to do. I mean, shout out to Ian Garlic, who runs videocasestory.com. And he's like, Jeremy, it needs to be super actionable, super specific, like saying, hey, I loved working with so-and-so is not a good case study, but
it's
let's just
exactly what
assume
I
it's
was
a
going
good
to say
one.
to counter.
Yeah.
I'm glad you counted yourself perfectly on it, because there's a profound depth and value of having tons and tons and tons. But I love that Ollie Gardner of Unbounce taught this thing called Frankenpage, one of the best in-person presentations I've ever seen. And he talked about how your case study should show the transformation, right? If you're not showcasing the transformation, then people can see right through it, that are more sophisticated in terms of marketing. So if you can combine the art of having hundreds of thousands of testimonials because you're just that like well known, and you can combine that with the showcasing of, wow, within seconds I can see and feel, dang, I want that transformation. That is huge. That's so powerful. I don't think there is much that can compete with that level of influence.
Yeah. And sometimes for inspiration, Jackson, I'll go to VWO.com. If anyone's heard of it, it's Visual Website Optimizer, and they've kind of shortened it to VWO.com. And the reason I get inspiration from there is because they basically test web pages, right? So they'll split test web pages. So you can show different web pages to, let's say, 100 to this group, 100 to this group, and you see which one converts better. And then you could even, swap out elements of that page. So everything's the same except for the headline, or everything's the same except for the example. So when you mention authority, I look and see, what do they have on there? Because I'm sure they've split tested this page a million times. Okay. Because that's what they do.
Yes.
So what I look at is, from an authority, okay, so they have a specific, actionable thing. Then they have some, banners of people, of companies they've worked with. Then they have a comprehensive platform. Then they have some case studies. So I just look and see how do they lay out the page? Because I'm sure they've tested this 1,000,001 times to get some inspiration, right? And what the calls to action are. And so from an authority perspective, obviously, when I'm going to go back to podcasting and authority. Obviously, you're borrowing authority from guests that you have had on, right? So when I had a friend say, "Oh, Jeremy, I love IQ bars," right? I'm like, "Oh, cool. He knows I like a good protein bar." So I go out, check it out. I'm like, "Oh, this is great. Maybe I'll have the guest on the founder of my podcast." He goes, "Well, do you know?" I'm like, "No, that's fine." So I emailed him, and that afternoon he responds with, "Sure, I'll come on the podcast." And he goes, "How'd you get him on the podcast so quickly?" I'm like, "Well, I just emailed him." But the truth is, there was a lot of social proof in my email, right? So I said, "Hey, I've also had, by the way, do you want to come on? I've had the founder of Quest Nutrition, RX Bar, Jimmy Bar, and I listed a bunch of other CPG companies on there." So even if someone's like, "Well, Jeremy, I haven't interviewed those people," that's cool. There's a lot. I think of, okay, what credibility and social proof do you have? How many years in the industry? What past clients or people have you worked with? Like you mentioned, John Lee Dumas and Lewis Howes, right? So there's lots of ways to have social proof. It's not just numbers. Like when I had reached out to the co-founder of Pixar, he didn't go, "How many downloads do you have?" Because I already provided enough social proof and credibility in that email that he didn't have to ask that. It didn't matter. Now that is one metric. Like if you got it, flaunt it, right? So if you have a lot of LinkedIn connections, if you have a lot of Facebook connections, whatever, you can use that, but there's lots of layers of credibility there.
There are, and I love what you said about I actually really like the quote that if you've got it, flaunt it. Just be careful, my friends, because it's like that title of being a doctor. If you're trying to pose with your accolades or as your titles, as your form of credibility, the most sophisticated of the market, the people who are going to want to work with you long term, they might buy from you temporarily, but as soon as they find out that you're not really all that in a bag of Doritos, they're gone. So I'm a big fan of the quote too. It's who you know, not what you know. But my quote is, it's who you know, not what you know, and then it's what you know. Because if you don't know what to do after you meet that who, you're screwed. And you're probably going to be screwed for a long time. So you want to make sure that your
Right.
credibility is tied to your authenticity, your integrity. And so what we were just looking at with BWO, thank you for that, Jeremy, because I'm going to be gifting this to my team because we are constantly looking at how do we make sure that our testimonials and our case studies, our authority is interlaced into our content in a way that's super organic through the show, through our landing pages. And BWO is one of the best pages I've seen. I was going to show vidIQ because vidIQ does a really good job of this. And it's not an accident that their features, their benefits, and their pain points just happen to be talked about by the clients that are featured throughout their website. That is not an accident. That is strategic plug to make sure that everything, every little piece of content that they have built into their page is contributing to showcasing just how powerful vidIQ is without vidIQ having to be the one to say, oh, we're the powerful one. We're the biggest in the end. Nobody cares what you think. People care what others think about what you do, and they care if you care about what they're doing. So with podcasting, I'm going to go back to the core simple principle that Jeremy started us off with. All of our content, all of our effort, if everything that we're doing is designed to show people how much we care about building a relationship with them, that's going to help you create something sustainable, create a sustainable podcast. So we've got very little time left, Jeremy. I want to make sure to make room for, is there anything else that you want to share from your golden bag of wisdom for the podcasters that are out there? Anything that can help visionaries and podcasters continue to grow their success?
Here's two things, and it's nothing to do with podcasting necessarily, but it does and it doesn't. It's more business, right?
Yeah.
I think of one of the two most important things that I have to remind myself of, and sometimes I forget, which is some of the most important breakthroughs I've had is because of mentorship, right? And podcast is, it could be mentorship through listening to a podcast, having a podcast guest on, listening to a book, but finding out someone I highly respect and delivering value to them, and in return, I had some great mentors. Like one, Brian Kurtz is awesome. He wrote Over Deliver, and just one of those human beings, like a true giver of a human being. And when I first had him on the podcast, I'm like, this person is going to be my friend, colleague, and mentor, because he's just an amazing person. And that getting a mentor that's doing what you are doing, who's been there, done that, and getting, I have mentors in health, in business, in variety of aspects. So it's not just one mentor for everything.
Right.
And so mentorship has been huge. So I'm always thinking of who has already done what I want to do, right? They already have the roadmap, right? And so getting that mentorship. Okay. That's one thing that has been.
I'm going to hit something subtle that because you just nailed it. And almost nobody talks about this, and most people can't hear it. One of the saddest lines I hear people say is, I have a coach. Or they're talking to an audience about somebody's off and like, I already have a coach. And I'm like, what kind of coach pigeonholed you into thinking that you only need one coach for life? Like you're stuck. Bill Gates, LeBron James, any major athlete, they all have.
I go to Michael Jordan, obviously, like he had nutrition coaches, fitness coaches, Phil Jackson, all those people.
So I just say, those of you visionaries listening, expand to having multiple, right? And of course, be wise about who you work with. So Jeremy, what's the point number 2?
So, a good friend, colleague, mentor, Ed O'Keefe, wrote Time Collapsing. And so I'm always thinking of time collapsing. How do you collapse time and get a result in a shorter period of time? And one of these things, Jackson, I sometimes forget, the biggest time collapsing I've seen, and it's not always possible, is from a mentorship perspective or relationship perspective, is to spend money. So some of the people that I respect, I will buy all their books. I will, if I have, if someone has the means, I will buy their programs. I will buy their master, like whatever it is, and to learn from them. And that's a time collapsing piece that, you can consume this stuff for free, but having that relationship and just putting money on the table saying, I value you and paying for your time. I have people that mentored me and they're happy to talk to me and not charge me. And I insist, I'm like, listen, your time's valuable. I want to pay you for a once a week session. I mean, they're a friend, by the way, but I want to pay you for a once a week session because I don't want to feel like I'm bothering you. and I want to pay you like ongoing, right? And so I have found that to be something that just jumps you right. Oh, I want to connect, well, just buy all their stuff. I mean, or buy whatever you can with their stuff, right? It could just be their book, right? $20 or whatever it is. So that's two things that I'm thinking about that from a time collapsing perspective have helped me personally.
Huge. I'll give another example of time collapsing from today, and a special shout out to one of my mentors, Dr. Lance Knob, who I met through this show. And Dr. Lance runs a mastermind on Thursdays of a super elite set of entrepreneurs. I can't believe it's free, to be honest with you, but he does a hot seat session where every Thursday at noon, we're all in this clubhouse, and the person that's in the hot seat proposes what their challenge is, and we all get to contribute on that. So today, the gentleman that was speaking, his name's Andrew, and another gentleman, I wish I remember, I think it was Tom. They were talking about social media and how to do better on social media, and they're old school guys. They know how to do the traditional business stuff, and they were both taking the humble approach of saying, like, I don't really understand or know it, and so I've got to do this, 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 and it was nothing aligned with the pattern of their careers, which was all built around teams and people. And so I jumped in for my session to give some feedback. I said, you guys are probably the two out of like, if I had a room of 99 marketers and you two, you would be the two that I would turn to help me figure out how to crush it on social media. And the reason why is, one, you have the humility to admit that you don't know what to do. Two, the other reason why is you understand the powers of team. So there's an old fable about two guys that are trying to cut down trees. One's old, one's young. And the young man's super buff, and he's trying to cut down trees. At the end of the day, the old man's cut down 2 trees, and the young man's only cut down 1. And the young man's going, "What the heck, man? Why were you able to cut down more trees than me? You were taking breaks, and like all the time." And the old man says, "Well, while you were sitting there just chopping all day at that darn tree, I was sharpening my axe." Well, they didn't notice the third guy. There was another third young man, and the third young man had chopped down 15 trees. And they're going, "What the heck? How did you chop down 15 trees?" And he says, "Well, I spent my first few hours hiring some people." So
I thought you were going to say a chainsaw, but yeah.
Right, there's a chainsaw aspect too. But I think one of the biggest challenges in entrepreneurship is so many solopreneurs fall in the category of entrepreneurship, and they don't realize it's a team sport. And that if you don't have great team members, you don't empower your great team members, you don't take action with great team members, if you fall into that mentality, I have to figure this out myself, I have to do it all, I have to be the one who the ego is taking over. But if you can build a great team, I could have never built this podcast without a team. Never. Not, especially not to the level that it is. I love my team. My team is what makes all this possible. And so I highly recommend studying these. Like Jeremy listed so many phenomenal resources to help you do it. He's helped us understand the value of mentors. But if you're looking at the people who've been successful for longer than 10 years at what they do, ask them about their teams. Ask them who helped them along the way. The most successful ones almost always have a whole group of people that they've been able to inspire to help them move. And that is time collapsing. When you've got 10 people who are working on building out the project, it's a phenomenal way to time collapse. And there's also ways we can do that for ourselves too. So Jeremy, this was so powerful. I wish I could keep going for another hour. I would love to, but I do need to be responsible for my team and get some things done for them. But those of you who are listening, drop your comments, drop your questions. Feel free to connect with us. I know that Jeremy's one of those types of mentors who's able to be there for people who want it. So don't hesitate to reach out to him. Check out rise25.com. See what that can do for you as well. And if you're in the space for moving forward with a podcast, make sure to lean on people like Jeremy and see how to do it. Don't try to do it on your own. You can avoid so many potholes, and you can make sure that you're following the best type of roadmap to get to where you want to go by mentoring with those who've already been there and done that. So Jeremy, I'll give you the last word. Final words of wisdom.
No, yeah, I just think there's a lot of free resources on inspiredinsider.com, which is my podcast. So you can search if you're looking for resources like how do I name my podcast or whatever it is, just type it in the search bar. I'm sure there's something there. So it's there for you whenever you want it. And connect with me on LinkedIn. If you're on LinkedIn, I'm more active on LinkedIn.
Very good. Inspired Insider Podcast. Let's check it out. I'm going to subscribe right after we hang up on this too. Jeremy, it's been an absolute pleasure and privilege. And Vision Pros, if you want to share your vision on our episodes, there's a button at visionproslive.com. In the top right corner, it says Be Our Guest. It is not that hard. You just click the button You clicked a book, and we would love to interview you. Even if you're brand new, you don't have to be a seasoned veteran in the podcast space, crushing in the B2B space. You can be somebody who's brand new, helping out your local neighborhood. I just love hearing about visions from people who are out there helping others in the world. Everybody take care. We'll see you in the next episode.
Thank you for being here today. I'm really happy that you tuned in to Vision Pros Live. I'm looking forward to seeing your reactions as these episodes continue to move forward. This is going to get more and more fun. We'll have more and more engagement as well. We'll invite people to participate in the show. And thank you for giving us your time and attention. Have an excellent time building out your vision and becoming a